The tracks were too perfect. That's what snagged my eye first. Deep in the mud, clean edges, like somebody pressed a stamp into the riverbank and said, "Follow me if you dare." I'd been up 3 weeks straight, chasing a low growl that rolled through my pasture at midnight and counting steers that didn't come home in the morning. And by then I could smell trouble like rain and dust. I squatted there with my fingers tracing those paw prints, big as my spread-out palm. And every hair on my arm stood up, because no wild cat steps that neat unless it learned to, or unless someone taught it. You know what I mean? Let me back up a sec. Before the canyon swallowed the sky and the sound of my own breath bounced back at me from black rock. Name's Cole Ashford. Been working this land long enough to know what tooth marks belong to what. And I got no quarrel with predators when they keep to their business. I've shooed coyotes with a spotlight, lost calves to a cold snap, seen a mountain lion now and then shadow the ridgeline like a rumor. But this thing moved different. It picked around my house like it was mapping my habits. And the prince came right up to the porch steps one morning, polished, precise, like a calling card. And that's when I saddled my mare and told myself I wasn't sleeping till I had answers. My neighbor Hank Mercer rode by the day before and said, "Cole, leave it be. Some things in this country ain't natural," and I told him I'd sooner sell my boots than let a hunter set up shop in my yard. Yeah, that happened. We followed the river cut west where the cottonwoods thin out and the ground turns to pale grit. Where the mouth of Dead Horse Canyon opens like a promise people around here don't keep. The sun climbed, the trail narrowed, and those prints kept their ballerina discipline, left right, never wobbling even where the wind had skated sand across the path. Then the story changed. I saw them before I believed them, small boot prints. Light stride but pressed deep like someone had been running hard. And here's the part that iced my spine. Those boots weren't fleeing the big cat, they were running with it. 2 sets of tracks braided together down the center cut like they were partners. I slid off my saddle, breathed slow, checked the wind, and Clara, my mare, rolled her eyes and pinned her ears at the canyon's throat as if she knew what I refused to. Voices don't carry clean in that stone, they smear. But I heard a woman talking the way you talk to a nervous horse. Low, steady, a rhythm more than words, and a sound answering her that wasn't human at all. I moved on foot with my rifle tucked tight, hugging the wall till the rock cooled my shoulder, and when I edged around a lopsided boulder, I saw her in a pocket of light. Tall, lean, auburn hair pulled into a no-nonsense braid, dark clothes with dust ground into the seams. She had a leather satchel open and a knife she used like it had earned her trust. And beside her circled the biggest black panther I'd ever seen this side of a story folks tell to scare kids home by dark. The cat wasn't slashing or spitting. It was waiting, head low, tail still. Like a ledger that won't balance until you find what's missing. A coil of rope, a pair of hand-cut stakes, a tangle of wire that had been a snare 10 minutes back. She fed the cat strips of raw meat and checked the edges of a trap like someone ticking off chores before dusk. That's when she lifted her head and found me without looking. You ever seen a hawk on a fence post that already knows you're there? "I know you've been on me since the river bend," she said. "Calm as coffee. Question is, what do you think you've found?" I stepped out with my palms open but not empty, told her my name and that my cattle had gone missing and that my patients had too. She touched the panther's shoulder, and I saw a pale scar along its flank, a long, thin burn a rope might leave when an animal fights it. "Name's Rhea," she added, "and her name's Nix. Been the only family I got since the day a suit with soft hands sent a message to my front gate." Before I could ask, a pistol shot cracked down the canyon like a bone breaking. And 3 horsemen bled out of the shadows. Sheriff Amos Kincaid with his badge catching sunlight like it was trying to run from him, and 2 deputies I recognized as the Doyle brothers, both steady, both shifty, both paid middling money to look the other way. Rhea called her. The sheriff called, "You're done running." He dismounted slow, hand resting on his sidearm the way a man rests a hand on a lie, and I stayed half in the open because hiding makes you part of somebody else's story. Rhea's rifle was already in her hands, muzzle down but alive. The sheriff said words about livestock and threats, about a wild animal trained to kill. And Rhea smiled without humor and threw a name into the space between us like a lit match, Victor Langley. If you don't know the territory, Langley's the kind of man who buys maps and then buys the land to make them true, who tips his hat to widows with one hand while the other signs a deed they'll regret. I had felt him in the margins of things for years. Fences cut, and no one saw. Rumors that turn into pressure that turn into sales. Rhea said her father had died on a hunting accident 3 months back, and the sheriff looked away because sometimes the truth lives in where a lawman can't bring his eyes. Nix rumbled like distant thunder, and the Doyle on the left put his barrel toward the cave Rhea had tucked the cat into. She fired a warning into rock, and the deputy's horse went half vertical. Threw him hard, and everything in the clearing sharpened into one bright thread. Shoot, move, speak, choose. I did something that surprised me as much as anyone. Raised my rifle not at Rhea, but at the badge, told Kincaid I wouldn't watch him point a gun at a woman for guarding a line nobody else would. Cole, he said, don't be a damn fool. And I told him I'd spent 3 weeks being careful, and it hadn't saved a single steer. Rhea met my eyes and didn't say thanks because we weren't there yet. But she said something better. Your herd wasn't killed, she called, breath even, voice tight. They were moved, pushed off Langley's survey line before his boys found trespassers and dropped paperwork to carve your east pasture out of your own map. Check the brands on the ones you found later, every cut new and clean, no meat taken. We weren't butchering, Cole, we were hiding what we couldn't fight head-on. The twist took a second to settle. Like when your ear finally pops at altitude and the whole valley snaps into focus. Nix hadn't been feasting. She'd been hurting, the way a fast shadow can turn 100 hearts in one direction. I opened my mouth to answer, and the canyon answered for me. More riders from the north chute, 5 of them, dust boiling around iron shoes. And at the front a man in a black coat that fit him like he'd rehearsed being feared. Victor Langley swung down, smooth, expensive, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. Sheriff, he said, glad you found the little problem. We'll tidy it up. He spread his men like a hand of cards, each to a choke point. And that's how you kill escape before you kill people. Nix stepped from the rocks then, all shadow and amber eyes, and the horses went white-eyed at the smell of cat like a barn goes quiet when a tornado holds its breath. Langley said kill it. Kill them if they won't move, and the Doyles flinched because even hired nerve stumbles in the face of what it doesn't understand. The first shots broke the day, hot metal humming past my ear, and Nix did what a taut thing does. She broke the horses, not the men. Sweeping low at hocks, so riders hit rock, and the canyon turned into a bag of marbles spilled at sprint. Rhea rolled to a fallen log and cycled her bolt like it grew there. I put a round into a shoulder that needed humbling and heard Hank Mercer's voice in my head telling me to leave it be. A little late for that, Hank. Chaos has a rhythm if you listen. Pistol. Ricochet, hoof, breath. And in that rhythm Rhea steered Nix with 2 soft clicks toward the north passage, shutting the door the way you wedge a chair under a knob. Langley scrambled to a boulder. Dust all over his black coat, trying to line up a shot with hands that suddenly belonged to a man, not a legend. Nix padded 10 feet behind him and sat, just sat, and let out a rumble that was less threat than promise. Rhea said, trained animals follow commands, Victor. And Nix took 1 step forward like a clock ticking. Langley fired wild and ran. Nix stayed, put like a judge who knows you already sentenced yourself. We were winning. But we were also outnumbered and almost out of air when I heard hooves again. Different rhythm. Controlled, not greedy. And for a heartbeat, I wondered which devil the canyon would cough up next. Sheriff Kincaid wheeled in from the south, and for a second the world tried to flip me upside down because he wasn't alone. A federal marshal with 3 territorial rangers, badges bright. And behind them Hank Mercer and 2 more neighbors who decided being scared had bored them. The marshal introduced himself as Ira Boone, red paper that put iron in his voice, conspiracy, fraud, intimidation, the murder of Rhea's father, and Kincaid, pale but standing up straight, said Langley had leaned on his house and his conscience finally fought back. You could feel the ground plumb again. Rangers collected pistols and curses, tied hands that had always been free to take. And when Langley tried a last mouthful of smooth talk, the marshal cut him off with the kind of silence a guilty man can't climb. One of the rangers eyed Nix and asked the question everybody was holding with a sweaty grip. What about the cat? And Rhea put a palm on that satin-dark head like touching home and said she goes where? I go, and she's never put teeth into a person who didn't come at us first. Boone studied Nix like a man deciding whether to trust a river in flood and said federal lines don't run through common sense. Keep her to the canyon. Keep the peace. And the government won't pick a fight it doesn't need. Sunset in a canyon feels like someone lowering theater lights slow, every edge gold, then red, then gone. And in that warm dim, I walked to Rhea and said a thing that surprised me again. Partner up, I told her. Not pity, not charity. I've got a boundary where trouble keeps testing the fence. You've got a way of reading the land I can't buy. Legal work, fair pay, no more running. She stared like I'd handed her a future by accident, then nodded once. Like a promise she'd keep even if I didn't. Behind us, Langley stood in irons, small for the first time in his life, and the canyon, empty of echoes now, felt like it could hold something honest for a while. We led our horses out under a sky the color of beaten copper, Nix pacing between us with her head high and her tail a question mark. And I won't lie, my chest loosened all at once, the way a knot surrenders when you stop tugging. But here's where I leave it in your hands, because that's how small towns keep themselves honest. Did we do right shaping a wild thing to hold a line the law wouldn't? Did a man like Victor Langley deserve the fear that finally came for him? Does justice look different when the badge steps back so a cat can take a step forward? Or is that exactly what community means when the rules get twisted by money and fear? Tell me where you stand. Drop your take on right versus wrong, on law versus survival, on whether a canyon like ours should make room for a creature like Nix. Because out here, decisions echo, and we all have to live with the sound.